Welcome to the channel. Let's talk some Texans. I'm Cody Stoots. Camp crushes. The Texans have finished up 6 days of workouts, 2 padded practices. Who are the camp crushes through these 6 workouts? We're going to dive into that on the video right now. Of course, you can always catch all of my writing at Houston Football. www.houfootball.com is where you can find that. Subscribe to the site. I'd appreciate a subscription there. I'd appreciate for you to subscribe to this channel here on YouTube as well. A like, a thumbs up, a share is always fantastic. Camp crushes, okay? You get to school, you get back, it's back to school time of the year. You get to school, and after a few weeks in school, you're like, okay, I like that person. Well, I like that person. Oh, yeah, no, I really like that person. There's some newness, okay? What did everybody do over the summer? Did somebody's body change, okay? It's new parts of the school year. It's a new part of the football season. So I got a couple of camp crushes. We'll go in order of who I'm crushing on the least to who I'm crushing on the most here in Texans training camp from a player perspective. I start off with the only offensive player on my crush list, and that is John Menchie, the wide receiver. Fantastic to have John Menchie back on the football field, and it is so awesome to see 8 running around out there on the field, taking care of business the way that he's taking care of business, and coming back from the bout with cancer that he had that cost him his first year in the NFL. Every teammate, every coach that's been asked about it, they're thrilled to have 8 running around out there, and he's an important player. He's going to be a very important piece to this Texans offense. He's a talented guy. He can play a little bit on the inside. He can play a little bit on the outside. And, man, there is some smoothness to John Menchie's game that he showcases. He hasn't showcased it a ton here through a handful of workouts and through this portion of training camp to this point, but it's very smooth when he makes things happen. I cannot wait to see him build and build and build. You got to remember, this guy hasn't played football since he was at Alabama because he had the injury. He didn't do any football-type stuff in the workouts or anything like that, so he had to come back from the injury. Then he beat cancer. He's finally back from the leg injury that cost him his final game at Alabama. And again, there's some smoothness to John Menchie's game. I'm very excited to see what he can bring to the table on offense. Now, flipping it over to the defensive side, 3 defensive players to round out my 4 camp crushes. And this guy, in my initial 53-man way too early roster projection, I didn't even have him on the roster. So I feel kind of bad. I almost forgot about him. Or really, I just didn't believe in him to the level that he clearly believed in himself. That's Roy Lopez, the defensive tackle. I'm going to call him the defensive lineman because there's maybe a little bit more versatility to Roy Lopez's game than he showed up to this point. But Roy Lopez, yet again, with a really impressive offseason to adjust his body. I don't know if the adjustment from year 1 to year 2 was the correct adjustment for Lopez, but year 2 to year 3, he's been putting the pictures out on Instagram. Fellow defensive lineman Malik Collins is making fun of him, saying, oh, Roy's throwing up the thirst traps on Instagram. Well, you know what Roy's doing now? He's throwing offensive linemen out of the way and getting run stops. He's throwing guards and centers out of the way and getting sacks. And in the most recent padded practice, he had a tackle for a loss, and then on the very next play, the offensive lineman stymied him, and he was kind of stuck, and then he threw his big paw up in the air and got a pass breakup. And that's not something we've seen from Roy Lopez before in his game. So the evolution of Roy Lopez, the success that he's had on the defensive line, it's an extremely competitive defensive line room. You got to imagine that Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins are the starting defensive tackles. You also have to think that Hassan Ridgeway, who's been very good, by the way, you got to think Hassan Ridgeway, the veteran, is on. And if they only keep 4 defensive tackles, the Houston Texans, then it's Kurt Hinish, it's Thomas Booker, it's Roy Lopez. It's a stiff competition for that final defensive tackle spot. If they had to cut it down today, I suppose Roy Lopez would be that final defensive tackle. A linebacker for you here, okay, my next camp crush. And this is a guy that I felt was going to be on the team, but I felt like his role was going to be very clearly established, and there wasn't going to be a lot of hope when you saw him out there on defense, and that's linebacker Blake Cashman. And boy, was I wrong. Cashman's been one of the best players in the entirety of training camp up to this point. He's had a fantastic week, starting with Sunday when he had some pass breakups. One of those should have been an interception. He had an interception. Then he intercepted C.J. Stroud on Monday as well. He had a nice tackle for a loss on Tuesday. Blake Cashman has been flying all over the place. He was an athletic guy, like the athletic profile of his style of play. Like just injuries had robbed him of some of that. He's healthy. He's playing really well. He's obviously a special teams contributor. That was his role last year, and that's certainly going to be a role for him this year. But now you're not going to be super concerned that Blake Cashman showed up on the field on defense. And in fact, he may wedge his way into the conversation when it comes to the linebacker room. That's another really competitive room that's going to have some tough cuts. You got to think about Christian Harris as one of the guys that's for sure a part of the situation at linebacker. You got to think about Denzel Perryman and Corey Littleton, two free agents that they signed with pretty similar contracts. So you think that as free agents, they're likely on the roster at this point as well. Henry To'o has been impressive in camp. I believe he's on the roster. So you've got Cashman, Christian Kirksey, you got Garrett Wallow, a couple of other, Jake Hansen, a couple of other names to sort of fill out that linebacker room and figure out exactly what D'Amico Ryans and Matt Burke are going to do with that defense and what to really expect from that linebacker room as they start paring things down. And remember, this year it's just one cut, so guys aren't going to have that trickle-down effect where maybe some competitors are coming off the board or some competitors at their spot that they think they're fighting for that final roster spot. Hey, they're done on this cut or that cut. One big cut. So you won't know until that final phone call comes and you're getting ready for the Baltimore Ravens on the 53-man roster. So that's going to be a one. So Blake Cashman. So to this point, one offensive player in John Menchie. Roy Lopez, who I very much underestimated coming into camp. Blake Cashman, who I thought was primarily just a special teams guy, and my final camp crush. And I think Dave Gettleman, the Giants general manager, one year called it full bloom love when he talked about Saquon Barkley, the prospect. I really liked Will Anderson as a prospect. I didn't know it was going to be this damn good so early. Will Anderson has been an absolute wrecking ball, a monster in training camp to this point, with pads, without pads. He's doing everything. He's stopping the run. He's getting after the quarterback. He's done this twice now in practice. A screen has gone to his side. He's taken a step forward, not initially right away realizing it's a screen, and then he's cut back to the pass catcher who's caught the screen, and he's made the play. Yeah, from the defensive end spot, Will Anderson has, that's a screen pass. Better turn and go catch the guy who has the football, and then he does. That's not something you see defensive linemen do very often. That's not something the defensive linemen are supposed to do. That's special. That's unique. That's different. And Will Anderson has just been incredible in training camp. I'm so excited to see him first against the Patriots, then the padded practices and the preseason game against the Miami Dolphins, and then the padded practices and the preseason game, if he works in the preseason game in Game 3 against the New Orleans Saints. And then ultimately the Baltimore Ravens Week 1, that's going to be the big test for Will Anderson. We know there's a heavy investment in Will Anderson that this organization made, trading up from 12. They gave up 12. They gave up 33. They gave up that future first that was their own selection, as well as, I believe, a third-round pick to go up there and get Will Anderson. And if he doesn't pay off, that trade's going to look rough. Well, to this moment, that trade looks totally fine to me. Okay, totally fine to me. Will Anderson has been incredible. He is the player I'm crushing on the most as we talk about camp crushes. Now, if you've been reading along at www.houfootball.com or you've been watching the YouTube videos, who is your camp crush? Leave it below in the comments, and we'll get to the comment section. It's always popping here on the comment section on the YouTube page. And again, below, you'll have the link to get to Houston Football. You can subscribe to Houston Football, subscribe to this YouTube page as well. And there's plenty more to come on the YouTube channel as well. I appreciate you for watching as always, and I can't wait till we get to talking some Texans again here soon.